Oh, Steve, we're back, aren't we?
We are back,
back.
and
We're
that
here.
is
We're
a
back.
sigh of joy, not
Yes, it was. It's hard to tell with me. It's hard to tell with me, but it was. It was. That was a sigh of satisfaction, anticipation, and joy.
That's right.
To
The
be
chinwag
here.
does that to you.
The chinwag does that to you, doesn't it? It fills you with all kinds of feelings. With,
Feelings and
hopefully
thoughts.
It does. Thoughts. All kinds of thoughts, too. This is the chinwag, of course, and I am Paul Giamatti.
And I am Stephen Asma.
And this, amazing. And we're here once again to delight you with mysteries of the mind and mysteries of the world and all kinds of palaver.
Palaver, yes. We're doing not just the paranormal, but also the historical, the psi phenomena.
Yeah.
What is
Yep.
history?
Yes, which is an interesting, yep.
There's nothing that we won't plow into confidently and crash around in. as a topic.
Plowing into it is actually, plowing into it is a very good way of putting it. Rear-ending the
That's
world,
right.
rear-ending knowledge and history. Yep, that's what we do. Bam, just yep. Like what was it?
Plowing
What was
into
it?
it.
Was it the Pinto that exploded if you rear-ended it?
Oh my God, we had a Pinto when I was a kid. We had a Pinto, and I think that might have been the Pinto. Yes.
Was it the Pinto or the Gremlin? What was it? If you like hit it, it would blow up. If you hit it from the rear.
And then there was like some
So to speak.
car from the Czech Republic. No, there was the Yugo. Wasn't there a
Skoda. Skoda is
Oh.
the Czech. A Skoda is the Czech car. Does it blow up too?
We're the
Skodas.
Skoda of podcasts. We're the Skoda of podcasts.
We're the top of the line Central European car.
That's right.
Listen, I think they're supposed to be really good cars, actually. I think
I
they're
don't
supposed
doubt
to be
it.
really good cars. So all kidding aside, because I don't want to get letters from the Skoda people.
That's right.
Yeah, I really don't need that in my life.
We're aspiring to the Skoda status.
Yeah, totally. Yes, you're exactly right. We're Gremlin. We're at Pinto status. At least you guys had a Pinto?
Yeah,
I
when
mean,
I
they're
was a
supposed to be
kid.
good cars, except for the fact they blew up, right?
Yeah, apart from that, they're great.
Well, before we get into more chats with the great Sarah Vowell, a lot of which is historical,
Yeah.
as always, a reminder to rate us, review us, give us some love and joy.
Head on down
Go
to
to
Apple and review us. Give us those 5 stars if you would, and go to YouTube and
Please.
write comments. We really love the community that's emerging around the Chinwag.
Indeed.
It's great.
And send us questions. Challenge
Mhm.
us with your thoughts, because that's good stuff. I enjoy that. I know you do too, Stephen.
Yeah, people tell us stories about their experience with the paranormal. We're basically drinking it all in.
Yes, indeed. And it's good. It's a heady brew, Steve. It's a heady brew,
It's
isn't it?
heady brew, indeed.
It's moonshine. It's like red eye. It's like moonshine. It really is. It's good. It's great stuff. And it's a joy to connect with you, the listeners. But back to today's episode. We had the great good fortune of speaking to brilliant author and essayist Sarah Vowell a little while back. She's written 7 nonfiction books on American history, including such popular titles as Assassination Vacation, which is really my fave, and The Wordy Shipmates.
Yeah, I read that
Which is
one.
all
She's a
about
great
the-
writer.
yeah.
Excellent writer.
Great writer. Great writer. So, of course, we got into some very interesting stuff, some obscure history. And it's interesting, as you'll hear, she claims not to be very interested in the kind of woo-woo territory.
Yeah,
that
she's
we
skeptical.
inhabit. She's skeptical,
Officially.
but she breaks out and she gives us she's officially very skeptical, but she gives us she comes up with an interesting story of coincidence from history.
Yeah.
That it was nice to hear her. See, this is what we do. We move people out of their comfort zone.
Exactly.
Don't we?
This
You know what I
involves Sacagawea, and we're just
Yep.
kind of gently nudging people towards the bizarre, and they can't resist.
Yep. Rear-ending people into the bizarre, really, is what we're doing, Steve. Kaboom. Kaboom. Anyway, this is the continuation of our sublime chinwag with Sarah Vowell.
Here's one woo-woo thing about me, and it's like purely a function of nonfiction, which is the absolute joy of the coincidence.
Huh?
Like, okay, here's a tragic figure from history is Sacagawea, who crossed, like I'm pointing out the window, like
Yes.
she like crossed this valley I'm sitting in with William Clark. And, she was basically, for all intents and purposes, a slave. And she was sold into slavery, kidnapped. She was trafficked, basically. And she was, she was basically a sex slave. I mean, if you want to get like brutal about it. But when Lewis and Clark got to this part of Montana and they see the mountains and they're like, oh, so this is going to be harder than we thought, and we're going to need some horses. And she was Shoshone, and they were known for their horses. And so like they progress and they're looking out for the Shoshone so they could trade for some horses. And she's going to help them do that. And they meet up with these Shoshone to trade for some horses. And she's talking to one of them and she realizes it's her brother.
Oh.
And she hasn't seen him, since she was a kid. And you know how big this continent is. And just like the moment, like this girl who was like just kidnapped and traded away and then somehow ends up with these like weird white guys.
Random guys.
And then they just like come across her brother, know? Well,
Adams and Jefferson dying on the same day.
Yeah.
Which when they sent me that script from HBO.
Day,
and I was July the 4th.
That's
July
right.
the 4th, 1820, maybe, I think.
Yes.
18.
It was 50 years.
It was exactly 50 years. That's right. That's right. And when I got that, I really thought they'd gone too far. I was like, you guys are going way too far. This is too cheesy, but you can't end the thing this way. Because it was really impossible to believe. It's super bizarre. It's super bizarre.
One of my favorite moments to write about the era of the Lincoln assassination was, poor Edwin Booth, John Wilkes Booth's brother, who was by all accounts, probably the greatest Shakespearean actor in America of that time.
Oh, was he really?
And
that whole family was very celebrated.
They were a big deal.
Edwin was really like,
he was the dude.
Yeah.
And he was the Alec. No. So.
Wait, does that make John Wilkes Billy or Gail? Or,
I don't know.
One of them.
It's different now.
Remember. There's like Schmendrick, whatever they are. What are their names?
So he, and his goal in life had been to make the profession of being an actor respectable because it was basically on par with prostitute.
Still is. Yep.
Yeah. And he was trying to, beef up that profession.
Class it up.
And then his actor brother, shoots the president.
Oh,
and
great.
So, yeah. And, he, but he was so beloved, people were like, come back to the stage, Edwin Booth, And so, few years after the assassination, he's at like somebody's house for a party. And he's just kind of poking around the living room and he picks up this like plaster cast of a hand from the mantle. And he asks his host, what's the story on this? Whose hand is this? And the host has to say, Lincoln, awkward, like that kind of.
Awkward.
Right. Yeah. Super, super awkward. Super awkward. I'm sort of fascinated by the story of the Henry and Clara, the two that were in the box with Lincoln when he was shot. Do you know this whole story?
Yeah. Henry,
Steve, I know you do. Yeah. Was it Henry Rathbone?
Was he killed?
Was it?
He
was not killed. No.
Okay.
And much to his probably sorrow, he was not killed.
Yeah, no such luck.
Yeah, he was, I guess they were supposed to be there with the Grants. The Grants were supposed to go to the theater with them that night or something. And I guess Ulysses canceled and they went with this other couple. You're going to know this better than I am, historian.
It's been like 20 years since I worked on that. I'm trying to think what their deal is. I know Thomas Mallon wrote a pretty good novel that imagined their lives. But I think they were kind of traumatized by it.
They were traumatized by it. The guy felt he was a soldier and he was some sort of lieutenant or something sitting in the box with them and he didn't I mean, he couldn't live with the fact that I think he ducked, basically. He sort of like dove to the bottom of the box.
And he couldn't, I see.
And like, and I think he couldn't deal with it.
He thought he should
for the
have
rest of
thrown his
life.
body to protect or something. Is that-
Yeah. I think he thought, why didn't I was the guy who could have protected him.
Have you ever done a production at Ford's Theater?
No.
Have you ever been to a play at Ford's Theater?
No. Is it wild?
It is wild. And like the one time I saw a play, because, the thing about Ford's Theater is it collapsed in, I think, like the 50s or the 60s. Like the whole interior of the building collapsed. And they rebuilt it. Why? I don't know. And they rebuilt it like perfect replica. And they have Lincoln's box, And so when I went, just so happened to be the production was 1776. And so like you're watching the founding fathers have their musical debates about what do we do about this slavery thing. And then you just keep like looking from the stage to Lincoln's box.
Wow.
Obviously no one can sit in Lincoln's box. They're not letting people sit in Lincoln's box.
But you can see it. Like it was like right there. So you can kind of see you can see the founding fathers just sort of kick this can down the road and like where it's pointing, like it's pointing into Lincoln's head,
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty fascinating.
I have a question about this, the coincidences thing that you brought up.
It feels like it means something. It doesn't mean anything.
That's what I was sort of wanted to ask you about, is that it does feel like these things mean something. And certainly in retrospect, when you look back, you can string it together so that it does mean something. But history doesn't add up this way. It's just chaos. And then you pick a pattern out of it.
It's chaos, but exactly. But there are these moments where you can just take a breath, that was weird. And then you move on to more chaos. I don't know.
More chaos after that.
Well, the whole thing seems
I have
really
this
chaotic.
I have this friend and we're always bumping into each other. Like I'll be on a train from Providence and a hand will grab my arm. Or like I'll be walking through a hotel lobby in Texas and there he is. Like,
wow.
Why do I always run into this one friend? I don't know. It feels like it means something, doesn't mean anything. We both travel a lot, Like why do these things,
why do they happen?
It doesn't have any, there's no meaning, but it feels like there's meaning.
But like you're with the Puritans, because I am a fan of the Puritans, and I liked the way you handled them, and you made some cool. One of the things you said that I really liked was you said they are our medieval people, or something like this. I'm paraphrasing you. They had everything was meaningful. Everything was layered with theological meaning.
They were practically like a medieval culture, sort of.
Well, people look down on them because they did unreasonable things, but they lived before the age of reason.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like what we were talking about earlier. You can't really, condemn an unreasonable person before the age of reason in the same way you can do so afterward. You know what I mean? So, but I guess I feel about them in some ways. I hadn't really thought about this before, but how you were talking about the cowboy hat Montana. And I'm saying no, I come from the Sibelius listening part of Montana. It's like with the Puritans, they're looked upon now as dum-dums and just hotheads and, but they were very learned and they barely, I am, as a former Protestant, fascinated by the educational aspects of Protestantism, because you have to learn to read, you have to read the Bible. So you have to learn to read. That was a big deal. That was a new one,
it was.
So, and they were so learned and they, barely finished, nailing together their little cabins and they're building Harvard because they want their ministers to know Hebrew and Greek,
Wow. That's amazing.
So they were very they were very intellectual for their time. And sometimes that was a really hard book to write because their they were Cambridge trained theologians, some of them, you know, and so sometimes I would spend weeks and weeks trying to figure out like, what are they arguing about?
Yeah, right.
And then I would finally get it and then realize like, that's not interesting. You know,
That's
like,
not
that can't go in the book.
That really doesn't matter. Yeah, that's just like,
I mean, they're like that guy, Roger Williams, I mentioned, who, you know, gets kicked out of Massachusetts and founds Rhode Island. Like there was this anthology with letters and some of these letters have like, you know, a 2-page letter will have like 20 footnotes because of all of his theological references, you know?
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, they had their quirks, but they weren't dumb.
But there's I was telling Paul that I'm trying to work through Burton's book, The Anatomy of Melancholy. And he says one of the things you should do if you're depressed
which is what written when? That's like 16th century?
It's like the 1500s,
century?
early 1500s. And he says, like, writing and reading is really good if you're depressed. Like, it's therapeutic. And I was just thinking, as I was reading you describing the Puritans, they were always keeping journals and diaries, like always working on shit. It was just endless reading and writing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great pleasures of working on that book was I got to go to, I think it was the Boston Athenaeum, and they have John Winthrop's journal, like his diary. And this was the diary that he was the governor of Massachusetts. He was the one who gave the sermon on the way over about saying that Boston should be as a city upon a hill.
Right.
Oh,
and
the Reagan
so
thing.
I get to
the Reagan
hold
thing.
those are fighting words, but so I
Okay.
get to hold the actual diary in my hand, you know, that he had. And he had this diary because he's the governor. That was a lay sermon. And so in this diary, he's planning the voyage and the settlement. So his diary is full of things like grocery lists, basically. Like, I need all these barrels. We need such and such amount of peas. We need all this butter. We need beer, you know. But then he's also in the same diary, he's making notes for Bible verses and things he's going to refer to in that sermon. Because that sermon, it was called The Model of Christian Charity, is his pep talk to his future neighbors. Because, you know, they came in 1830 and Plymouth was 10 years earlier and half the Plymouth settlers died. This stuff like disease and malnutrition and like, you know, exposure. And so he knows what they're going to do is going to be really hard. And that sermon is, I mean, you can tell from his diary, all he's thinking about is how am I going to take care of these people?
How am I going
and
to
that's what the sermon is about. It's like, we're going to need to take care of each other.
Amazing.
And that was the thing that like rubbed me the wrong way about the Reagan thing, because to him, it's the city on a hill. That image is just like, everybody be like us.
Yeah.
But Winthrop said it like the eyes of all people are upon us, meaning they're going to watch to see if we fail.
If we can pull it off.
And to him, like failure was that they would not take care of each other. And like I wrote it, there's this part of the sermon, I even wrote it down thinking we might discuss this. This is my favorite part. We must delight in each other, make others' conditions our own, rejoice together, mourn together, labor and suffer together, always having before our eyes our commission and community in the work as members of the same body. And that's like such a beautiful image of community, you know? I mean, obviously, if you like strayed from the path,
you got banished.
He and the other magistrates. Banished is like the good one. Like having your ears cut off was
right.
like
There was
one of
all
the
that
options.
stuff. Right. Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying they were perfect, you know,
Sure,
but
I know.
like it was like a beautiful image of community. And I'm always drawn to these groups, you know, like how do you become part of a community, become part of a group and retain your sense of self, you know, like that is kind of the question of America, really.
And the utopianism too is interesting.
It's kind of like building a
Oneida
utopia.
and
Yeah.
Amana and stuff. Like it
That
seems like
tradition of
Americans
people
really
trying
like
to-
utopian projects.
You know, I mean, you were talking, Paul, about how, like the people who are in these towns and at these historic sites, like the boosters and the docents and you know, in that assassination book, I had to go to the Oneida community because the guy who murdered Garfield had lived there for a bit.
Yes.
And it's a pretty weird utopian community. You know, it's where the term free love comes from. There were a lot of rules and stuff, but it was this very eccentric place in the, you know, 1840s. And I think I was looking down on them. I mean, there are some things to look down on, especially the way like young girls were initiating into sex is kind of creepy. But
it had a lot of that culty, creepy cultiness to it.
It was a cult. But then like the guy, I can't remember his name, who was the docent. And he is saying like he was giving the tour and he was saying, can you imagine what it was like to live at that time and want something else, you know, some other kind of life, and how they found this place. And it was this, like, to them, a place they could breathe, you know? And I hadn't really thought about it. I just thought it was this weird biblical sex cult. And but he made me really think about, like,
you mean in terms of what a big step they'd taken outside of the norm, like how what an extreme move it was.
How like constricted life was in you know, in that time, and you know, they found this weird house in upstate New York where, you know, and it was a place for them. It was a home, you know, and I really had like put myself in their shoes. So that was actually a pretty educational moment for me to, you know, even people I disagree with or, you know, look down on, to like try and find some empathy there.
Yeah.
And that's why you should study history, is to try and understand, you know, like there's more, it's more educational to try to understand than try to judge, I think. I mean, there's plenty to judge, obviously. I'm going through this ancient Rome period. Those
fantastic.
people were horrible.
Horrible. But super fascinating.
Not boring.
Super fascinating. Really, what period of Rome are you studying? And I'm super fascinated by the Romans.
I mostly got interested in Mary Beard, the Rome scholar.
She's awesome.
She's fantastic. Yeah, she's really great.
I'm kind of a poor man's Mary Beard, if I may.
No.
Have you seen this? There's this, it's on YouTube. There's this debate she had with Boris Johnson.
Oh, no.
And it was, you know, Boris Johnson is a big, like, Pericles fan. I guess he studied classics at Oxford, I think.
I bet he got his ass
he
kicked.
did. I hope he got his ass kicked.
There's this public debate between Mary Beard and Boris Johnson, Greece versus Rome.
Okay.
I gotta see that.
You've got to watch
I gotta see that too. That sounds amazing.
So he takes the side of
Greece,
the side of the
Greeks?
Does? Like
he takes the side of Greece. She takes the side of Rome. Like her whole thing. Like one thing that I find interesting about her, that like, is her the whole thing about Rome is the regular Joes, the people like, you know, the dock workers and all of that. And, you know, the thing about like some of those television programs, you know, she'll be at some museum or series of like tombs or something. And, you know, there's just like Latin words where if you were just a tourist there, you would just walk right by them.
But
and
she's like,
this is saying like this person was a fabric dyer or, you know, like that. And then a lot of them, I mean, it's interesting. Like the thing about slavery is, eventually the Roman slaves could become citizens,
right?
You know, but they have to, assimilate. You can't just, you know, you can't just be a citizen who's still super Libyan. You have to like
you got to become Roman. You have to take the toga and all that stuff. You have to you have to become Roman. Yeah,
but like her whole thing is more about the regular people and what Rome was like as a place to live, and just like the miracle of it, really, like 1 million people in one city, 2,000 years ago, and then just stuff I hadn't thought about, like how are they feeding them? And it turns out like that's part of what the empire was about, was, keeping Rome alive.
Right.
All the
Just
stuff
feeding
coming into Rome.
grain and all this stuff, and it was all just like pouring into it. And that always amazes me. They had multi-level like apartment buildings and stuff that must have
Yes.
just collapsed
Plumbing.
constantly.
Some plumbing.
Plumbing and central air and stuff like that. I would think in a debate like that you're going to think the Greek guy is going to win out over the Roman because the Romans go so crazy and the Greeks don't seem to go crazy in the same way. So that I would think you could, if you were a good debater.
It was either like a call-in or the people in the audience voted, and the host and Boris Johnson were all about the Greeks, but Rome won because of Mary Beard.
Yeah, she must have argued it really well.
And
because I would
yeah.
think that, I don't really know much about Pericles. To me, always confuses me because wasn't he starts democracy, right? I mean, he establishes democracy, but he's also a tyrant, wasn't he? I mean, which I can never sort of
I think
reconcile.
democracy happened before him,
Uh-huh.
but I think that was about like getting rid of the like uppity bums who were running things. But he's like the one who built the Acropolis and
Uh-huh.
like gave
Right.
the stirring orations and everything. But
I think the Romans thought the Greeks were like artistically and philosophically more sophisticated than them, but they saw it as a kind of effete, useless kind of the decay of empire. And they were more about like the pragmatic,
Yeah.
let's build out and just work on,
Yeah.
the basically like the plumbing will basically make sure.
Plumbing is like huge.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, huge. They fascinated me. I mean, they've fascinated me since I was a kid, and I've never been quite sure why, because they are, but they're amazing. But I feel like I was never really interested in dinosaurs. I was interested in the Romans. And in some way there was some, really, because little kids are interested in dinosaurs as they're big,
Yeah.
sort of stomping around. And in some
your
way the
dad
Romans,
was
but Romans were kind of stomping around and everything.
Well, that's true.
So it was a little bit like, and all the kind of crazy, the madness and all of that stuff was really attractive to me. The kind of really Baroque insanity and all that stuff. And
I mean,
Like
another use of history is, we have some kind of eccentric politicians, in our
Sure.
country
No.
right now. But,
sure.
but are they like crazy Roman
That
emperor
crazy?
Yeah,
level?
not
Yeah,
that
that crazy.
Yeah.
No, they're not quite that crazy yet, but you never know. I was actually thinking this recently. When did they stop offing each other in England? Like because they all just killed each other, and then that stopped at some point. Was that sort of like after they chopped off Charles I's head, and then they kind of stopped murdering each other after a while? Because at a certain point, because I always wondered why doesn't Harry go back and just kill them all and take the throne and stuff like that? I mean, why did that stop?
When
Why
did
don't
they lose
just-
their
and what
nerve?
would-
Is
yeah,
that
when
what
did
you're
they
saying?
lose their
so
nerve?
soft.
When did they lose their nerve? When did they get
mean-
so soft? And what would happen to him if he did that? Would he go to jail, or is it just like I legitimately
Yeah, he
I'm
would.
going to poison
he would go to
everybody?
jail, Paul.
Would he? Okay, all right.
Yeah.
That's too bad. Everybody wants soft. When
That
did
was
the whole
all
world go
downhill
soft?
after Magna Carta,
I
that
guess
was
so.
the beginning of the end.
Was it sort of? People
I think
stopped
so. Yeah.
offing each other as much? Maybe so.
Oh, I don't know
yeah.
about the offing each other, but that was the moment where like the king had to cede like,
Yeah.
that like
Yeah, true.
the king wasn't above the law.
Right. Okay. So that's when that went to shit. That's too bad.
But when I was growing, I grew up Catholic. I was raised Catholic, and we were taught, as most Christians are, that Christians good, Romans are the bad guys. Like they play the role of the bad guys. And then when I got to start reading Cicero and Seneca and all these people, I thought these guys are actually kind of cool. And I actually appreciate their worldview is very different. Like for Christians, like pride is a sin. But for the ancients, pride is what you want. It's just a totally different value system.
That Stoic thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Kind
that
of
Stoic
like
thing.
And militarism.
Militarism
Yes.
helps. Yeah. But they were very, like we were just saying, with sort of people having to adapt themselves, they were very good at assimilating. I mean, they would bring in ISIS cults, and they would bring in all these different religions and
Yes,
stuff
they
like
were
that.
very,
They were very
weirdly
welcoming to all that
open-minded.
stuff.
I mean, that
Yeah.
was one reason they were so successful at, colonialism.
Right.
They would let the
It was a good political tool, but but
You
they
could
were
keep
pretty,
your God.
provincials could,
they were pretty open to all of that stuff. That's fascinating. Are you working on? Are you going to write a book about the Romans, or no? You just
Yeah,
into
you
them?
should.
No, I just have interest.
Yeah, I'm super.
I've
interested in
learned
them.
that there's things that there's too much to learn, like I wrote this book about Hawaii.
Oh yeah.
And the like learning curve on that was so steep, and it was such a humbling experience. It makes me kind of want to stay in my lane a little bit.
Really? And you felt it was out of your lane because it was just about a general history of Hawaii or
It
America's
was about the
involvement in Hawaii?
Americans taking over Hawaii, but in order for that narrative to land, I had
Yeah.
to say like what was lost,
Yeah.
Right.
and I had to learn so much about like the history and the culture, and I would hang out with there are all these sovereignty activists, people who still have a
king
problem with Hawaii becoming part of the United States.
Huh.
And one of them, I was doing an interview with him, and both of his grandmothers had worked for the last queen of Hawaii, who was overthrown. And I was having lunch with him, and I wanted to like ask him about the overthrow of the queen, because his grandma's worked for her. I asked him about the overthrow of the queen, and he answers by starting with the beginning of time. And that interview lasted, which I thought was just going to be a quick lunch. That interview lasted 7 hours.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Because I think this is what he was doing, but I'm still not sure. But he was telling me what I would come to learn was, I think it was called the Kumo Lipo, which is the genealogies of the Hawaiian aristocracy. And he starts with start from the beginning of time.
Wow.
And I think what his point was trying to say, just the age and the depth of this culture, and this, one political action in 1893 was like severing the Hawaiian people from, time immemorial, and their this culture that I gotta say I learned a lot, but it was hard to learn all that. And then some of those people, because of the nostalgia about that queen and the Hawaiian monarchy, they're monarchists.
Basically.
And I am
not a monarchist.
Not a monarchist. Yeah. So I don't know. I think that maybe I would do some road trip kind of through Rome, but I doubt it. Especially when you look at the great thing about Mary Beard is, she has this joie de vivre and this, wonderful colloquial delivery, but she knows her stuff.
Yeah.
She'll be she'll just read a plaque and this is great, and that's what
Her
that
Latin
says.
is amazing.
And
I
the
love
Latin,
that.
and
love
she's
that.
just all of her. She's just one of those communicators who can pass on knowledge to just any old American.
So-and-so.
Yeah.
I feel like
American
she's
so-and-so.
what's interesting too is that even though she's so skilled, she has an agenda too. She's, like you said, she's tired of the hagiography, just the emperor history. So she's going to tell the little person's, or the working person's history. There's always room for other narrative, even if you don't know the Latin as well. There's always another angle in Rome. So I think it's exciting. You can always
He's
write a
also
history.
I find corporeal, and she always can bring things back to the body, and that's something that is important to me when you're writing about history, is to try and give a sense of the body, or have you guys been to Gettysburg?
Yes.
And how there are those mausoleums at Gettysburg.
Yeah.
And it just says the number of bodies.
Yeah.
And everyone who goes to Gettysburg is going there because of Lincoln and what he said and what it means. And this is what the Civil War is supposed to mean. But then you go to Gettysburg, it's bodies, 154 bodies, 156 bodies.
Every 5 feet is a monument telling me how many guys died here. It's insane.
And
it's insane.
It just makes it.
It's a whole different experience.
Yeah.
The Romans seem like a good people to go to that place with too, because it's like they were a people so sort of tactile and so like the lived experience of it, we can still get a really good feeling of. Whereas I feel like the Greeks and the Egyptians, and you go further back, they get more alien and remote. But the Romans seem so much more like, that they're barfing and they're crapping
you're
and they're like, and they're
yeah.
look at me. Yeah, exactly. I'm Italian.
Still the same.
Still the same. And it's like, still the same crap. But it's like, it's like, and that madness even feels much more actually human in a weird way. And so it's like the narrative of that, they start to
seem... Why are they taking all those baths? Like, how dirty are they?
All the bathing. But exactly, it's all of that stuff. It's all the like eating the weird food, taking the baths, all of that stuff is really super interesting. It makes them really like more palpable than a lot of other people before that to me. And I think that's one of the reasons I like them too, is they seem much...
I was watching this documentary about Pompeii and they had just unearthed this. It was basically like a fast food restaurant. These archaeologists, and they had it was like a counter, and there were vats where like the food and the wine and everything. And the guy described the moment when he pulled like one of the covers off, and and he said he was just engulfed in the smell of wine.
Right,
really,
from like 2,000 years ago.
Yeah,
and he called it olfactory archaeology. But like sometimes, I mean, I do like ideas, but every now and then, you just want to get down into the like muck of the
stuff.
the street.
No, and it seems like you can with them in a really cool way. Definitely.
You could go to that museum at Walter Reed and you could see the bits of Lincoln's skull.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it's a
That's
very
on display?
like, it's a kind of holy experience, when you can see the little pieces of his skull that the surgeon who was doing the autopsy, like took the little pieces of the bone. I mean, just to like keep thinking about his murder. Like this was a person who was killed,
Yeah.
It's not just an idea or like an event.
Yeah. No, I had an extraordinary experience which one cannot have anymore, and I was actually lucky to even be able to have it. I shot a movie in the Ambassador Hotel, which used to be used basically as a movie set, and it was empty and abandoned pretty much. And you could walk around in it, and it was a crazy place and very spooky and very strange. And these enormous corridors, dark corridors going on forever. And you'd shoot in the ballroom we were shooting in, and people would shoot all over the place in it. But it was pretty run down, and now is gone. They tore it down. But while we were there, I don't know whoever was minding the store for the location said, "We're not supposed to do this, but we can take you into the kitchen where Robert Kennedy was shot." And he said, and we went in there, and it was pretty dark, and the guy had flashlights and taking us in there. And he said, "This is where you can see behind the doors where Sirhan was standing. And right down here and chiseled into the tiles was the coroner's X in the tiles where his head was lying right after he was shot." And it was it was a similar kind of thing that was just like the palpable feeling of the guy behind the door, the head lying on the thing. And the kind of banality of it. You're in a kitchen. You're just in this weird kitchen, and this guy's laid out on the ground. It was really wild. It was an amazing thing. And it's gone now, which is too bad, but it was an amazing thing. I kind of hope somebody saved the tile, but I don't know if anybody did.
Have you ever been to Dallas and like over by the 6th floor museum, and you're like going there and you turn the corner and you're on that street. Like you're on that street. And
you're on that street. I shot a movie there in Dealey Plaza, and I played Zapruder. It's a bad movie. It's not a great movie, but I played Zapruder, and I stood on that plinth that he was standing on, right near the fence. And I remembered thinking, oh, for sure, he thought he heard something. It was right there. I bet he did. But what's really strange about that place is how small it is. It's like it doesn't, you look at the thing and it looks like a big grand sweep of street, and it's not much of anything. It's like an overpass that you're standing next to. It's really bizarre, and it's really banal feeling in a great way. Yeah, it's like the banality of it's amazing.
I feel like we've taken up a lot of your time here, Sarah. No.
We've ended on a note of banality.
Show edited? I don't know.
No.
Not really. No, not terribly. No, that's the thing. It's kind of the point to it.
But it was very fun. So
Oh, no problem.
It really, I've been a big fan of yours for a long
Likewise.
time, and thank you for coming and just shooting the shit.
You want
with
to know
us.
that, like, I remember you, the first time I noticed you was in my best friend's wedding. And you were the guy, like,
Mhm.
the bellman.
I'm a bellhop. Yeah,
Bellhop. Yes,
a
you're a
bellhop,
bellhop.
bellman. Yes.
And I remember in that movie, like, you know, it is what it is. But it's like, who's that guy?
That's awesome.
Like, he's in his own movie. You know?
I'm sure I was. I'm sure in many ways I was. But
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for
You're
saying
what
that.
I call a sticker outer.
Thanks a lot. Yes. Thanks a lot. Well, so are you.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah, no, but then thank you very much.
Chinwag is a production of Treefort Media and Touchy Feely Films. Hosted and executive produced by Paul Giamatti and Stephen Asma. Executive producers for Treefort are Kelly Garner and Lisa Ammerman. Dan Carey is executive producer for Touchy Feely. Our series producer is Rachel Whitley Bernstein. Original theme music by Luke Top, with additional music by Via Mardot. Oscar Guido is our executive in charge of production. Tom Monahan is head of audio for Treefort. Audio production supervision by Matt Dyson. Editing and mixing by Jeff Neal. Animation created by Alex Sokol. Research assistance by Aidan Brooks. Lastly, for more information, go to chinwagpod.fm and find us on Instagram or TikTok at chinwagpod or on Twitter at chinwag_pod.